What's up, everybody? We're going to go ahead and start with talking about the drive gauge for Street Fighter 6. So, just this past weekend from the 7th to the 10th of October 2022, we were able to get, access to a closed beta test, which means that the general populace couldn't get in, everybody couldn't get in. Like, if you're familiar with Guilty Gear, they had a beta last year before the game came out. Had mad people, had everyone try to get in right before the game came out. That's not the same case here. It was only like on a limited code by code per platform basis. So there's a lot of things that people have kind of been watching and talking about when it comes to Street Fighter 6. If you're fortunate enough to, follow the right people on Twitter, YouTube, social media, whatever. But I still get a lot of people in different chats kind of asking, what's the drive gauge? What is it? What does it do? Really, like, what is the purpose of this mechanic? So if you look at the top of the screen, we're going to take it like from step one. You got your health bar at the top, green bars, you got 6 segments. That is the drive gauge specifically. Now what you're seeing at the bottom, even though you see the bottom bars here, this is not the drive gauge itself. This is the bar expressly for critical arts, or supers if you're just used to calling them supers if you've been playing games for a long time. Supers are pretty much functioning the same as usual. We'll get into that later. But when it comes to the drive gauge itself, there's a lot of things that become possible and impossible depending on how it is that you use this meter, or if it's available, or if it's been exhausted at all. So, starting out with the drive gauge. In general, everyone's used to Street Fighter after, Street Fighter 3, you have the introduction of EX moves. You can use EX moves based on, how many segments you have left in your drive gauge. So, the drive gauge itself, it depletes whenever you use an EX move. You have your regular moves like Fireball, see it like this, regular, nothing special to it, no depletion of the gauge. Press 2 buttons at the same time instead of just one, you get the EX just like pretty much every game that's been coming out for the last, we'll say 10, 15, 20 years at this point. But proceeding forward with that, you have a lot of different EX moves that are just varying and unique to each character, but they all deplete based on, how many stocks you have left on the drive gauge. So as you can see, I left it on full. If you have meter left to use, you can still use your drive gauge. However, let's say we only have 2 left, right? You only have 2 left. It takes 2 segments of that gauge in order to use an EX move. And then once you use it, it's gone. And when it's gone, you enter the exhaust state. So when you enter the exhaust state, you can't use EX moves anymore. So now, as you can see, it's filling up slowly, but at the same time, this is when you enter the exhaust state. Exhaust state is a serious drawback. It makes you have to think about how you manage this, because it's not just like using meter in the traditional sense. If all you do is like either spam or play super mindlessly when it comes to utilizing your meter, you will be punished for it now too. Now this meter can be taken from you, but your own usage of it also goes into the management now, compared to previous Street Fighters where all you have to do is just make sure if you have enough stocks to use it, whether it be for EX or a full stock to use for supers. Now supers and EX moves have been separated. So pretty much it is as it seems. If you use this meter all the way out, just going wild, doing whatever, you're gonna go to exhaust. Now, talking about exhaust state in and of itself, actually, let me... What happens is that the person who goes into exhaust, we'll use Ryu for example as a primary. Now, I can't use EX moves. See, I'm pressing both buttons, but there's no special, no EX special coming out. I also take additional block stun, and I'm pretty sure there's a damage modifier. I may be wrong on that part, but basically a lot of things become a lot more dangerous. So whenever you go into exhaust, you're basically being penalized for your lack of meter management or your lack of awareness for having your meter taken from you. So you may be wondering, well, hey, if I got meter, how is it going to get taken from me? There's a couple different ways that can happen, but primarily it's several different ways. Usually it's like if the drive gauge itself is being used on you, or whenever you're blocking, it can be taken from you. Supers take it away. You can lose it when you're getting hit. Like, See? If you look at Luke's gauge, it depletes even though he's not taking damage. But the benefit to having your drive gauge taken away is that you don't take chip. But now that he's been put in exhaust, he takes chip. The little yellow segments at his health bar that are being slowly taken away, he's now being put in that traditional sense of, hey, he's taking chip. And since you're taking chip in this exhaust state, that also means that you can be chipped to death. When you have drive gauge left, you cannot be chipped. See? But you do lose stocks or pieces or little bits of the segment of your drive gauge for blocking. This is why the game is a little bit more offensive based, I would say, because there are going to be instances where you're going to be dealing with someone who may have good strings and pressure, but if you don't, defend against it properly, you can't just down back for long periods of time because you'll be put in exhaust. When you're put in exhaust, you lose your ability to do anything with the drive gauge. You can't do EX moves, you can't do a lot of stuff. The next instance of what you can and can't do when it comes to using the drive gauge as a mechanic, you basically have the ability to do not all the game's mechanics, because all supers are not the same, but you have like drive parry, like this. You can just hold it. As long as you hold it, and as long as you have segments left in your drive gauge, it's not going nowhere. But if you hold it for too long, and if you deplete it, you'll go into exhaust. So we're gonna let it go. When it comes to regenerating your gauge, you'll get it back whenever you do normals on a person, specials, or if you successfully parry. There's multiple different ways in which you can parry, specifically two. You have the regular parry where if you hold it, the opponent will just swing and you'll just automatically do a traditional third strike parry. And then after that, it's like you'll get your segment of, your drive gauge back based on whatever it is that you're blocking. If you block multiple hits or something, your gauge will shoot back up like a rocket. If you block one thing at a time, it might just give you little chunks. It depends on what move you're parrying at the time. Perfect. See? So what we'll do now, we'll have Luke attack me so you can get a visual for it. You see how it's regenerating on its own? I'll use EX Fireball, which will be safe, and then I'll parry afterwards. I get meter back. See? You always want to pay attention to how much drive you have, because even using the parry itself costs meter. You see how it chunks down bit by bit just by starting it and by tapping it? It goes down. And now I'm exhausted. There's a lot of different ways in which you can try to utilize parry. Its general use is as it sounds, but if you time the parry properly, you can get a perfect parry, which slows the game down. I'll try to do it. I haven't really gotten very good at it yet. But the basic premise is that, as it sounds, you get like an even more extended third strike type parry. Like instead of like, a couple of things becoming a lot more unsafe, whether it be on that parry situation or whatever, the entire game slows down so you can hit confirm it. So when it comes to perfect parry, it is a very strong tool. However, it is not perfect. Even though, the name is called perfect parry, it has a lot of weaknesses. It can be baited. It can basically always lose to throws. There's a lot of things that you can do, but it still just loses to the basic rock, paper, scissors option of getting tossed. So what you want to look at whenever you're trying to use this is how much meter you have left, and if you really have the read on the person to risk using that. Because if you don't, and you just parry and nothing happens, you lose all that drive regardless. It doesn't come back unless if you successfully parry, or if you perfect parry and continue into a combo or punish. Another huge thing about, the drive mechanic is that you want to make sure that you get more comfortable with using the drive rush. What is drive rush? It's literally as it sounds. If you will actually turn this on so you can see the screen setting. We'll put the input history on. So you can see it's medium, both medium buttons. That's the parry. Simple as that. Now, whenever you have the parry itself, you can rush out of it by dashing forward, similar to an FADC. You've probably seen this and you're probably wondering like, well, what are the, the uses of using drive rush, right? Drive rush comes in really a lot of different ways. Like, you can use it to not only close the gap on people, you can parry and then, dash forward depending on what you've parried and punish someone. It also changes frame data based on the moves, but we'll talk about that in a second. Drive rush is not limited to only being used out of the parry either, because even though you see it be used out of the parry like this, you can do multiple things in as far as it goes for activating it. Basically, any move that can be, if I'm recalling correctly, special canceled, you can drive rush out of it. So what does that mean? Standing fierce is Ryu's standing heavy punch button. If you're not familiar with that term, it can be special canceled in this game, just like that. So look at this. So now I've closed the gap without having to jump in or having to risk dashing forward unsafely. So the important thing to look at is, if you can see the bar that's right above my head, you have standing fierce, which is typically not a safe button, right? Actually, well, here's what we'll do. We'll turn Luke back off. So block reversal, and we'll talk about the trading mode in another video. So we have this. -2, right? So with drive rush, buttons as unsafe as like standing fierce, which is special cancelable, keep that in mind, can now become safe. And when used in drive rush, which is the green graffiti and spray that you see when they're attacking, every move that you press within that window will have that effect on it. Has, I think, the universal rule as far as this build is, an additional 4 frames of recovery removed. So they're 4 frames faster than usual. Now it's +2. As far as this build of the game goes, that seems to be the universal rule. So crouching low forward, right? -6. Now -2. So a lot of moves that are originally like not crazy unsafe if you already know how to space, but moves that are typically unsafe on their own become significantly safer after just using your drive gauge, because then you just boom, and now all of a sudden that button that was minus, is now plus. So what does it mean that, you have this button that's plus? Basically, you can now go forward and either attempt frame traps, tick throws, shimmies, setups. Like, you have so many more things that become available, because now you can use buttons that might be pretty decent on block already. Like, this is -1 for a jab, -1 for a stand strong. Is now +3. So when a button is +3, you just want to make sure that you basically use any button that can come out faster than what is the standard for a light, maybe like 4 or 5 frames for a button if people like to mass jab, or if there are fast reversals or specials that people like to use, which range from, in this game it's been about 4 or 5 frames, you can now stuff stuff like that. So we'll have block reversal, right? I'll see if I can time this so you can get the visual. See how he tried to hit? But he got counter hit instead. That's an example of like what you can just do with it. Buttons just become different in general, and they're all basically 4 frames faster if you use them while you have that effect on you. You can only use one button out of drive rush that will have that effect for the cost that you've used in that specific instance. Now, if you want to do something crazy and just keep spending it, you can. But then that comes into the meter management that we were talking about for the drive gauge. If you go for it, it's your prerogative to do so. But keep in mind, it's not always available for you to just spam. You do so recklessly, you'll go into exhaust. You basically, kind of shoot yourself in the foot. So meter management is split not only between EX, drive abilities, and now supers. You have to really think about how it is that you use that meter, because it can be taken from you, and then also you using it is taking it as well. Before, in Street Fighter games, it was a lot more of like, if you didn't have like V trigger, for example, you would just not be able to utilize the ability, or you may not be able to V reversal, or you couldn't activate your V trigger. So when it comes down to basic things, as opposed to like a V skill activation, if you don't have drive rush because you're an exhaust, you can't do it. So we'll spend it. So you can't parry, which means you can't do drive rush, and even if you wanted to drive rush off a normal button, you can't. You see the history? These are special cancelable buttons which allow you to go for drive rush. It's no longer available when you're an exhaust, so keep that in mind. A thing that's kind of been gone in Street Fighter V was the traditional way to be able to chip someone out, aside from having a super, and if their gray life allotted for them to die. In Street Fighter 6, you can chip people out, but they have to be in the exhaust state first. Well, okay, so Luke's in exhaust, right? So you can now go through and chip, just like I told you earlier. Little bits will go down based on what your special's capable of. So it's about 150 points in chip. Training mode's great, right? So this is an even quicker way to get to it. So he has drive gauge, we're gonna take it from him, and now he has no health left, right? He has basically nothing left. There's no way for him to really do anything. This allows people to start developing ways for, checkmates again, aside from just going straight into super. But basically, since every special move does chip, if you have a way to get in, and you have more meter and you're not an exhaust, you can do all kind of crazy stuff now. So the important thing to remember is the players, or I guess specifically the game, still allows you to have access to all of your regular moves, which means that you can't just go bug wild just because it may be checkmate, right? Because even though you might be swinging and going for wearing down that drive meter to get the exhaust state, they still have drive meter left, even though they have that little bit of health. As you saw, it took all those hits, it took all that confirmation, it took all that whatever. You got to take the rest of it, and now it's gone. They still have the means to attack if they have drive left, just because they have even that smidgen of health left. But when they have nothing to protect, or basically no green left, that's what enables the chip. That's one of the key factors about making sure you manage your drive gauge. Because when it's gone, it's gone. So it's like, it's realistic to say that someone may have like 5%, right? So a really common thing now is for people to have supers, because a really common thing that I've seen throughout the beta is that people may use supers in different varying ways, but they may also try to hold on to them specifically for the level 3, because it's the biggest payoff if they get a confirmation. So if you get caught in exhaust, basically you're fighting for your life more than usual. So like there are instances where it's like, you saw how the button that I was using earlier for stand strong or stand fierce were like minus or slightly minus. Stand strong, as an example, is typically -1. And exhaust, it's now +3. This is +2 in exhaust. This is now +6 in exhaust. Examples for what we had of what we could do as regular buttons, and then drive rush plus buttons now become nightmarish for anybody that's in exhaust. What you want to do is you want to make sure you take care to not only approach the person so you can get in and continue to pressure them, but be aware of what, frame advantage you can give yourself out of using your drive rush when theirs is depleted. So that doesn't mean you want to get into the habit of just getting predictable, like dashing in, jumping in. But if you get comfortable with using your buttons and utilizing the drive system overall, you can get away with a lot of stuff. But at the same time, you can also close out games. And if a person's looking for it, you can try to bait something, and you can try to do a lot. That's a bit what I mean. You can do a lot, but if you go crazy, now I'm in exhaust. He has next to no health left, but I'm in exhaust. So his regular buttons are about to be hellacious depending on the character, and now I'm about to start taking chip. Depending on what character you're fighting, they may have a lot of, relatively easy to access strings. They may have strong specials that might leave them either plus, slightly minus, so they can continue pressure. Now I have to guess and I have to fight back. And in comparison to previous Street Fighters, all characters are not guaranteed to have invincible reversals unless if they use their supers. So Dragon Punches are a good example for that. Ryu's Dragon Punch. If you look at the bar, what you're looking at is the startup is green. Is that how long it's active for? I think it's active for that long. So startup and active frame starts at frame 5, but if you don't see any white on the bar, there's no invincibility. See, if you look at the bar right there, right here, that's the invincibility period. If that is not showing, that typically means that you don't have invulnerability. If you see purple, like how you just saw right there, those are armor frames. Armor frames and invincibility frames are not interchangeable. We'll go over that in another video so I can kind of describe what the properties will be. But we'll get into the last mechanic for the drive system, and that's going to be, well, it's two things really. It's the drive impact, and then it's the actual alpha counter or drive reversal that you can use. Drive impact. This is probably going to be the thing that you see people use a lot on release of the game, and it's going to be for a lot of different reasons. So this move is for everybody. Everybody has it, no matter what. So as long as you have drive, you can use this, just like how if you have EX availability in the drive gauge left, you can use it. Now the thing is, it takes about a whole stock, so you can literally just do it until it's over, but if you go over your limit, you'll go into exhaust. So this move, it has 26 frames of startup. In total, it lasts about 62, and it's -3, but it's mostly safe against everybody in the game. I haven't seen anybody really punish it on block, but just because you can't punish it on block doesn't mean you can't punish it at all. As you can see, it's a very big, very dramatic move, similar to like a level 3 focus attack in Street Fighter 4, which is, I'm assuming, the inspiration for this move. But because of the gigantic startup of the move, it's relatively easy to react to. So a lot of the ways in which you can punish this move come from just, neutral jumping it. You can throw it. You can, honestly, if you activate your own super, or if you activate your own level 3, you can also break through the armor and then just go through the move. The reason why I say that there will be a lot of complaints about this move initially is because the payoff for this move is really big. If you're not really conditioned to see all the different activations, like you're seeing someone drive rush and you're trying to block, but then next thing you know they do this, and you're not, completely visually acclimated to seeing what activation or, animation is which, you're probably going to get hit or block it. The reason why blocking this move is so dangerous is because there's a lot of things that can happen depending on how far away you are from the corner. In the corner, if you block this move, you're going to get hit with the wall splat, which is basically a guard break. So from is it here? Yep, right there. So about there. Alright, so let's see. It might be a little bit further. So yeah, really far. Really far. And when you get guard broken, you're free to get hit by anything. It's basically it's level 3 focus attack, but it comes out faster than a level 3 focus. Like, you block it, and it's like, if you're in the corner, you're gonna get hit by whatever else that the person can come up with, depending on their spacing in which they've used it, and most people are becoming aware of that. You block it mid-screen, it sucks, but, it only just does this. It more so resets neutral. So, walking forward, putting them back in the corner, I'll show you more of what I mean of like, hey, let's just have a basic situation, right? So, dead, right? So you really don't want to be the person on the receiving end of this on hit or block, because if you get hit by it, it's a crumple. I just showed you the more basic, application of whenever someone's trying to hit you in the corner with it, but there's so many situations where it's just, you don't want to get hit. That's a punish counter. If you get hit with a punish counter with that move, You get the giant animation, you get the big rumble, you can kill, you can do a lot of damage depending on how much health they have left. It also takes a huge chunk of their drive. This is what I mean when I say that like getting hit in general is dangerous, but it takes a huge segment of that drive out. So you don't want to get touched by that at all. It can lead to basically, even though it's a little bit of a skill combo. Your next move starts out at about 20% less damage than usual, so you can go straight into supers, you can max out, lab up, whatever. But drive impact is going to be something to watch out for when you're new to the game, because if you are familiar with Street Fighter 4, people who got hit with like focus attacks were like, man, I got crumpled on counter hit. Or you took the whole level 3 and you got crumpled and you took all the damage and you took whatever came out after. This is more of an express version of that. Now, you have super armor on this move, but the super armor only lasts, you know, like I said, for 3 hits. We'll do it like this. So, you're going to see me go for the activation, and he's going to go for his super. See? Oof. That's the difference. So it's pretty much like armor in almost any game. If you have something that'll break it with either 3 hits or more, or if you have invincibility itself does not break it, but sometimes you'll just go out if you have invincibility. And if that's the case, you might either sneak by. You typically won't recover if you're doing like an invincible BP in time to, you know, punish them for it, but you won't take the drive impact, which is still pretty good. So there's a lot of different ways in which people can try to deal with drive impact. Yep. So this is an important one too. What you'll see a lot, and especially what you may have seen in the trailers for Street Fighter 6, is this interaction specifically. If you have drive impact, or you're able to, you know, perform the action, specifically if you have meter left, you can do it back. Now the cool thing is that you want to make sure you go second. You always want to go second if you're either reacting or you're reading this motion coming out, because if you do it first, you'll lose. Watch. So even though I told you, hey, you want to go second, I hit a button, I waited for him to press a button because I was -1, he activated it, he mashed it, whatever real life situation may come up, because people are people, I did mine second, his lost. See? But if I do mine off of a button, and he does his second in the recovery of my button, which is going to be a common situation too, I'm going to lose. So you want to make sure that you pay attention, and when you use this, even though you might think you have a trap available, if anybody has, you know, a super, if anybody wants to, I'm not going to say throw, because it may not always let you throw straight off of a button if they block it or get hit by it. But you want to pay attention to this option in general. It's going to be used a lot. Like, a lot. It's going to be used a lot. But like I said, it loses in different situations too. See? There's a lot of different ways. I tried a perfect parry and I got smacked for it, but that's a throw. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to... Yep. So if you can bait it, you can do whatever. I might have messed up a little bit, but you get the idea. So basically, when it comes down to this mechanic specifically, you really want to make sure you're accustomed to seeing the difference between drive rush and the actual drive impact. Let's talk about this too. So you can get stunned in this game. Even though you may not have the traditional meter where, you know, you might see it like in Third Strike or the invisible one from Street Fighter 4, or in 5 you have the visible one. It's important for you to remember that exhaust carries a lot of disadvantages, so you want to manage your meter properly. So now he's in exhaust. So you saw how I had him doing the reversal? He can't do it. But now that he's in exhaust and I have drive impact left to use, If he blocks it and gets wall splat, he gets stunned. Like complete stand stun. Like it's almost like a better crumple because he'll stand longer and you can get in position. So here's what we'll do. Right. See? This mechanic is going to be the thing that makes or breaks people, because if you don't pay attention to what your options are, and if you don't get used to the actual visuals for which is which, you're basically playing on the difference of either having to block a rush down or you're getting wall splat into a free combo. So you can get wall splat pretty much at any point. Like that. But if you do that, you can get counter hit, and then you're getting hit anyway. And then the biggest one is that you want to make sure that you don't want to get wall splat in exhaust, because if you get wall splat in exhaust, that's the stun. So there's different breakdowns for the interactions off of drive impact alone, and there's also multiple ways to beat it. So we're going to do this with Ryu as the visual now, so that way you can get an idea of, hey, I'm trying to do a button that's like slightly minus or maybe even plus, right? So I know my opponent likes to use this as a reversal because maybe they don't have a DP, maybe they don't have this, they don't have that, but this move offers them an armored way out to challenge buttons. So you're going to bait it, right? There's a lot of different ways you can do so. I showed you can do throws, you can neutral jump it, and this is more of what I mean when I say either multi-hits or it's either multi-hits, I do know it's like 3 or more, and then it's supers that pretty much do the job too. See? Armor break. So you want to make sure that you don't get caught slipping when it comes to this move, because it's going to be used a lot. Like, this will be, in my opinion, either in the next beta if it's open or on release. This one right here is going to be the scrub killer. This is ridiculous. People are learning how to play and get around it and whatnot. It's going to be really useful, and there's going to be a lot of ways that you can play around it. But if you don't have that knowledge and if you don't give yourself a chance to get familiar with it, the drive gauge is going to be the thing that either keeps you in or keeps you out. So make sure you get your hands dirty, learn how to use it. I think that pretty much covers everything when it comes to the drive gauge itself. We talked about the EX moves, drive parry, perfect parry, drive rush, alpha counter. I'll give you a visual for the alpha counter. So for reversal, we had drive impact, right? So we'll do light punch. You can alpha counter in this game. Same input, except you block and then press forward and then both heavy buttons. But it is not safe depending on what it is that you try to alpha counter, so be careful. See? I'm holding back and I still get punished. Pay attention to the visuals as well, because that might give you an indicator on whether or not you were either doing something that's unsafe, or if you were mashing in a situation that you basically weren't supposed to be mashing in. There's several instances where basically every character in the game might use something from the old game. I'll say any old game really, like Street Fighter 5, 4, whatever. Ryu, Fireball, there's a gap in between. See how it says counter hit? It's actually -5. So you want to be careful. But yeah, getting used to that as like one of the more basic mechanics in the game is pretty useful, but that's going to end the discussion when it comes to the actual drive gauge itself. But yeah, if you guys want to hear more, feel free to follow the channel. Thank you for checking in. And yeah, we'll see you next time.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.